been linked on our website for those who missed this session or who want to watch it again. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment@wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. This evening's session will focus on the recommended multi-track year-round calendar for Bowling Road Elementary, along with a what-if scenario for opening the school on a traditional calendar. As a reminder, tonight's session was prepared by the Office of Student Assignment, and some of the information we will review with you this evening is a subset of the full presentation that was shared with the board during their work session on October 15th. Again, this evening's session will focus on the recommended multi-track year-round calendar for Bowling Road Elementary, along with a what-if scenario for opening the school on a traditional calendar. Otra vez, si necesita ayuda en español, por favor envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment@wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. Before we begin, let me go over some logistics. Our session will last for no more than an hour and a half. We will begin with a presentation and conclude by responding to questions from tonight's session. We recognize that now and throughout the session, you may have questions regarding the proposal or the recommended stability rules. To capture your questions, we will be using the Q&A feature within Google Meet. To access this feature from a computer, please click on the three shapes in the toolbar on your screen. If you are using a mobile device, select the three dots first, then select the icon with the three shapes. You should then see a Q&A feature identified by a question mark icon. To ensure your questions are anonymous, our host and moderators will be monitoring the Q&A for questions and capturing them throughout this evening's session. Once you see that your question has been removed from the Q&A, that means your question has been successfully captured by our moderators and you do not need to resubmit your question. We will make every effort to respond to your questions toward the end of our session. In addition, we will use your questions to update the FAQ portion of our website. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment@wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. In addition, if you have specific information you feel has not yet been considered by staff or the board regarding the current revised version of the enrollment plan, we encourage you to participate in this thought exchange. The thought exchange will remain open through November 3rd. After it has closed, we will summarize the feedback received through the thought exchange and will share this summary with the board during their work session on November 12th. No one will be personally identified in the summary. Before I turn things over to Susan, we would like to remind you that tonight's session will focus on the recommended multi-track year-round calendar for Bowling Road Elementary, along with a what-if scenario for opening the school on a traditional calendar. By the end of this evening's session, you will have had an opportunity to briefly review the assignment planning process, review the current recommendation to open Bowling Road Elementary as a year-round or as a multi-track year-round school, review a what-if scenario for opening Bowling Road Elementary as a traditional calendar school, and perhaps most importantly, share questions you have that will help you gain a better understanding of the potential impacts of the proposed plan for your family. And now, I will turn things over to Susan.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for that warm welcome and for setting the stage for today's presentation. And again, thank you to all of you who've joined us this evening to have a discussion about the Bowling Road Elementary calendar. As a reminder and to provide some context, this year's student assignment proposal does focus on the opening of Bowling Road, Rex Road, Pleasant Plains Elementary Schools, along with Felton Grove High School. In addition, there are some base assignment changes that are included that are unrelated to those specific schools, some calendar application changes, and other recommendations to relieve our captain overcrowded schools. The proposal also includes recommendations for the stability rules for families that will be impacted by the recommendations included in the plan. The initial draft was presented to the board on September 3rd, and we conducted several public engagement events after the release of the initial draft to help families better understand the recommendations. In addition, we captured a substantial amount of feedback from the community and have worked to review and consider all issues brought forward during these efforts. On October 15th, a thorough review of the feedback was reviewed with the board during a work session, along with a few recommended revisions to the initial draft based on that feedback. All of this information was shared with the board during their work session on that day. And during that work session, the board had an additional conversation about specifically the calendar for Bowling Road Elementary, which brings us here to today's session. All of the information we'll share during this evening's presentation is available on our enrollment proposal site that you see highlighted here at the top of the slide. In addition, all information related to this particular enrollment plan can be found on this website. This is a time-limited website, so it'll be open throughout the planning process and the approval process, and eventually will close usually around January following the approval of the plan. Please continue to visit this site in the coming weeks as we do regularly update the site with additional resources, updated videos, as well as updated frequently asked questions. We recognize that some of you may now just be joining us or may have missed our little tutorial on how to use the Q&A feature on the Google Meet. So again, if you're using we'll be capturing your questions using the Q&A tool. If you're using a computer, we ask that you start by clicking on the three shapes that you see here somewhere on your toolbar, and that'll take you to the question and answer feature. If you're using a mobile device, you'll need to click on these three dots first, and then you'll find that set of shapes, and then you can find the Q&A tool. As a reminder, we're capturing your questions anonymously and confidentially, so we will capture your questions. When you see that the question has been removed from the Q&A, that's your indication that our moderators have successfully captured your question and will address it later in the session. In addition, we have a special thought exchange open for this particular discussion. If you haven't had a chance to participate in that thought exchange, we would encourage you to do so. This particular thought exchange will be open through November 3rd, along with all other information that we're collecting during this round of the draft plan. We will summarize all of it and share it with the board at a future work session. We're targeting November 12th. Before we get into the specific recommendations, and just to make sure that everybody has a level of understanding that's equal about the planning process, we will briefly review this process. So if you've been to previous sessions, we won't even take as long as we did in those previous sessions. We're going to go really, really quick through this. But we do just want to make sure you understand how we got to the point where we are. So if you're interested in learning more details about our assignment planning process or watching an instructional video that really helps to break down all of the steps of the enrollment planning process or the assignment planning process, we encourage you to visit our assignment planning page. This is a permanent page that's open all year round, so you're welcome to visit it at any time during the year when you have questions about our assignment planning process. The policy that guides the development of our district's annual enrollment plans is Board Policy 4150. The policy directs staff to balance, to the extent reasonable, the goals and factors identified by the four main pillars that you see listed here. They are student achievement, stability, proximity, and operational efficiency. Each of them do have specific definitions within Board Policy 4150. And so just to make sure everyone has a good understanding of how those are defined in policy, we're going to share a brief video and then we'll continue with our presentation.
Understanding student assignment. It's no secret that our school district is growing, and it's growing fast. That means each year we need to address overcrowded schools and often need to open new schools to keep up with this growth. To state the obvious, we may have to reduce the enrollment at an existing school or fill new schools with students. This is done through the annual student assignment process. To best understand when and where new growth is coming in our district, we conduct an annual enrollment forecast. This forecast helps us look ahead up to 10 years and project enrollment growth throughout the district. This information helps us update our capital improvement plan and to make more informed decisions related to school assignments. Each year, some students are assigned to one of our new schools or reassigned to an existing school. This ensures we have balanced school populations across the district. We know families love their schools and that student assignment decisions can be worrisome. That's why we want to be completely transparent in how we make them. Our school board has established 4 pillars that guide each and every student assignment decision. Here's what they mean and how they work together. Student achievement. We want all of our schools to provide the best academic opportunities for our students. This pillar compels us to think about whether a student assignment plan can help reduce high concentrations of poverty or low-performing students at some of our schools. Stability. Essentially, we try to keep as many children at their current school through the exit grade as possible. When reassignments are necessary, we provide the opportunity for some students to submit a stability transfer request and stay at their current school through the exit grade. Operational efficiency. This pillar is about making sure all of our schools and transportation resources are at their best use. Overcrowded schools are a problem. Classrooms packed with too many students are one thing. But then there are the endless carpool lines, bathroom facilities that can't comfortably accommodate everyone, and having to start lunch when most people are still working on breakfast. On the flip side, having under-enrolled schools is an inefficient use of public resources, particularly when there are crowded schools nearby. Proximity. Okay, this one can be a little tricky. In a perfect world, houses would be built in neat little rows on a predictable timeline and at a slow and steady rate. As it is, we live in an imperfect world where lots and lots of homes pop up in one area, while growth is slight or non-existent in others. For this reason, it is impossible to send every child to their most proximate school unless we want some of our schools bursting at the seams while others are half empty. That said, this pillar states that we will send students to schools within a reasonable distance. Often, the difference between the most proximate school and the next most proximate school is no more than a couple of miles. Please remember that we must consider all 4 of these pillars when making assignment decisions. There is no priority among the 4 that applies in every situation. It's a balancing act that ultimately helps us come up with the best possible plan for everyone. Thank you for working with us to ensure our school system continues to serve all students well.
We hope that video helped to explain the policy with a little bit more detail. And again, if you'd like more information, you're certainly welcome to visit our full board policy website. But in addition to that guidance that's provided by that policy, we sort of kick off our enrollment planning process with the presentation of the annual student membership forecast. This forecast provides both 1 and 10-year projections for enrollment growth throughout the district. And even though the enrollment forecast does provide us with a 10-year outlook, we still update it every year to make sure we're capturing the most recent updates to things like residential development, commercial development, and other demographic information that helps us to refine the forecast. As you can see here, there's 3 years worth of the forecast layered on top of each other, so you can see the wisdom of continuously updating it to make sure we're capturing the most up-to-date information with each year. In addition to knowing how many students the district needs to serve over the coming years, it's also important to know where throughout the district and within the district this growth is going to occur. Excuse me. And so, what this map shares for you or depicts is the projected change in enrollment across the district through 2033. What you'll notice is that the growth is not evenly distributed throughout the county or the district, and that some areas of the district are projected to stabilize and have minor changes in student numbers over the next 10 years. The next step in our process then is to review the projected crowding for the next school year. So what you see here is information that was put together in March of 2024 based on that forecast that we just described. So in addition to providing that 10-year outlook, it does provide us that 1-year projection, which is really helpful for not only helping us think about crowding for the coming school year, but also for determining funding needs for the district going into the future school year. So again, these recommendations or projected crowding numbers were produced in March of 2024 based on the 2023 forecast. And here you see just a quick look at the projected crowding across all levels. Elementary is on the top left, middle schools are here in the middle, and then high schools are over here on the right. The third step in our process is a review of the capital improvement plan, or the CIP, which includes any adjustments that have been made during the annual review process for the CIP. Highlighted in the green circle here, you see the location of Woods Creek Elementary, which opened this year in July as a multi-track year-round elementary school. The orange circles that you see here, here, and here represent the new schools that are projected to open in the 25-26 school year. So those are the ones that are included in this year's enrollment plan. And then the remaining circles that you see in that sort of dark gray or black color are in the out years of the capital improvement plan. The chart here depicts the same information in chart form. Please note that although the major renovation projects during this same time frame are not listed on this particular chart, they are accounted for during the enrollment planning process. And I do want to pause and acknowledge that we do have an asterisk beside each one of our school titles. You can see the one example here. And that's just to remind us that based on market volatility, scope changes, or changes in design and construction schedules, these are all subject to change. So it is always possible that these projects might be pushed out a year or more, depending on any types of schedule updates. At this time, we are planning for the opening of Bowling Road, Pleasant Plains, and Rex Road elementary schools, as well as Felton Grove High School, all highlighted by the circle or the sort of squared box that you see here. We are also taking advantage of some added capacity at Bauckham Elementary as it's completed a major renovation, and Fuquay Arena Middle, which is relevant to today's conversation. Once the forecast, the projected crowding, and the capital improvement updates have all been reviewed, then we're ready to start beginning the process of our the fourth step in our process, which is the development of the annual enrollment plan. The first step in this process is to do some public engagement activities to capture thoughts and ideas from families and community members to help inform the development of our next enrollment plan. In fact, we started this process 2 years prior. So we've been starting to come out to communities about 2 years ahead of the opening of a new school. For this year's plan, or for this year's sessions, they were held between March and May. And in addition to some live sessions, we also hosted a couple of virtual sessions to make sure that we increase access to the information to all members across the district. We also opened up some individual thought exchanges that were school specific because we are planning to open so many new elementary schools between this year and the next school year. And so that information was collected during this process as well. For a full update on all of the information that was gathered and collected during those information sessions, please visit the assignment planning website. And then we're often asked, and I won't go through all of these, but we're often asked, how does that feedback that you've collected get sort of turned into any sort of change or modification or adjustment to the planning process. And these next two slides, and I'll let you kind of look at the resources online if you'd like to. I won't go through them in great detail, but there's 4 examples here of how the stability rules have been amended. Historically, they were really restrictive, and maybe only rising fifth graders would be allowed to stay at their current school if they're assigned to a new school. Over the last couple of years, we've been able to expand that based on the feedback we've received from families about wanting more stability, to include not only fifth graders, but fourth graders. So that's more students being eligible for stability transfers. In addition, historically, families were only allowed to bring their younger siblings to join those rising fifth graders for the 1 year that that rising fifth grader was there. So if I had a current kindergartner, a current second grader, and a current fourth grader, because that current fourth grader would be going into fifth grade the year that the new school opened, all three of the students would have been eligible in the historically, to have a stability transfer and stay for the 1 year. Then, after the fifth grader would move on to the middle school, those younger siblings would automatically be assigned to the new school and shifted over to the new school for their address. And so, based on the feedback from the community asking for increased stability and talking with principals about what this would really look like, we've expanded those to not only say that those younger siblings can join the rising fourth and fifth graders, so there's an expansion. they can also stay through the fifth grade if that's what the family would like, so that they can have that stability as a family with that school experience. So, those are some very specific and concrete examples of how stability rules have been adjusted over the last several years based on community feedback. In addition, there's a whole slew of other elements to the assignment planning process that have been revised and updated based on community feedback over the years. We used to present the assignment plan in December and approve it in February, which gave families very little time to make adjustments, especially if the school was multi track year round and opening in July. And so we've now backed that up. In fact, this year, when we brought the plan to the board on September 3rd, that was the earliest we've ever brought an enrollment plan to the board. So, really thinking about what we're hearing from the community about advance notification, give us as much of lead time as you possibly can. And you can see some others here. So if you're interested in learning more about those, you can ask questions about them in the Q&A tool, or you can check out the website to read through those. But we wanted to just really concretely share with you that your feedback does matter and it does impact the process. In addition, after we start that engagement process, we also have a very specific conversation with the board. This year, we had that conversation in May, and it's just a clarifying conversation to make sure we're really clear on what they'd like to see included in the upcoming enrollment plan. So, this year, in addition to making sure we had plans for those four new schools, they also asked us to continue to focus on capped schools and addressing those wherever possible, along with other overcrowded schools. And they asked us to maintain our focus on our school choice options that you see listed here. And so all of those are factored into the assignment planning process as we get closer to sharing an initial draft. Once the board's weighed in, once we've got that initial public information, then we're really ready to start putting together and finalizing a plan for release to the board. So on September 3rd this year, we presented the initial draft of the 2025-2026 school enrollment plan. And that included all of the information that you've probably reviewed before. And so we won't go over all of that today. We'll go over just the specific conversation about Bowling Road. Once that plan is released to the board, then we immediately kick off another round of public engagement to make sure that the community has an opportunity to ask questions about the plan and better understand the recommendations that are included. And this year, for the first time in a number of years, we also added in a face to face or live open house. And we brought together a lot of resources to help families and get questions answered about academic programming, about hiring of staff, about special education services, before and after school care, transportation. I could go on and on and on. It was a really successful event, and we look forward to continuing to provide that service for families in the coming years. Once all that information was collected, we started building a profile for the board of what all were we hearing from the community. And one thing I just wanted to stop and share is we also hosted an online thought exchange. And that thought exchange, while it gives us individual ideas and individual questions that really could use some responses, it really led to who we invited to our open house by way of example. Another thing that it does is it allows us to look at where are there some common ground. And so what you see on this chart, and I'll just use the one example and then I'll let you kind of use your intuition on the others, is that there might be a group that's really highly rating the concepts of proximity and commute, right? So anything that had to do with proximity or commute considerations might have been really highly rated by a particular group of participants. And then secondarily, a different group might have really been emphasizing things like calendar consistency for families and maybe not, rating thoughts about proximity and commute so high. So they were sort of rating two different areas really highly and then maybe rating each other's a little bit lower. Regardless of that, either way, for those two groups, stability for students was something that they both highly rated. So it lets us really see what's really critical for families. So clearly, stability for students. And then, of course, you see towards the bottom something about proximity and commute considerations. So we really, this isn't a surprise to us, but it's good to have that affirmation that these are the things that are really motivating parents to participate in our engagement. And these are things that are really important to families as we think about our enrollment plans. So, again, a full review of all of the information that we collected during those September engagement sessions is available on our enrollment proposal site. So, I encourage you to visit that if you haven't had a chance to. We've recently updated the frequently asked questions section to more clearly outline some of those responses. So, hopefully, you find that to be a helpful resource. Once we've had all of those opportunities, then we share that information. So we shared that information with the board on October 3rd, and this is the time period that we're in. And we're also, doing a couple of information sessions to share what came out of those reviews. So, just as a quick reminder, this is the part of the process that we're in. There's still a couple more steps to go. So, once the board does officially adopt and improve a 25-26 enrollment plan with the attendance areas for the new schools and the other elements that were included, they'll be ready to start having conversations about, okay, where did the enrollment plan not solve some of our crowding concerns? Do we have schools that either need to remain capped or need to have a cap added because we've got such severe crowding in that region and we weren't able to address it with the opening of the schools that we had this year? And then following on the heels of that is any other utilization concerns, or capacity and use concerns that couldn't be solved by the enrollment plan that weren't can't be solved through capping that might need something else. And so this is just a continuous process, and then it'll restart when we get the new forecast in January, February, and then we'll get ready for our 26-27 plan. And again, just to keep reiterating, all of this information is available on our assignment planning site. So again, as those of you who might have joined us a little bit late, we are using the Q&A feature in Google Meet to capture your questions for today. So if you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to go ahead and post those. Just as a friendly reminder, if you see that your question has been removed, that means our moderators have successfully captured your question and we'll be able to address it later in our session today. And again, there is a very specific thought exchange that we've opened up for this conversation about Bowling Road. If you haven't had a chance to participate in that, I would encourage you to do so as well. That goes as a full review to the board, and the board has access to all of the information that's in there, and that will also be summarized for the board prior to their public hearing. The questions that you asked today are really just for the purposes of today's session. So if you've got a question that you think needs to be really elevated so that the board and all of the planning team members can see it, I would encourage you to also post it to the thought exchange. All right. So that was a quick overview of our planning process. And so as we go through what we recommended for Bowling Road, I'm just going to quickly review what the original recommendation was so that you can just get we can all orient ourselves as to what the recommended attendance area is and what the original recommendation is for the calendar. It takes into account the guidance from Board Policy 4150. It takes into account all the input and feedback we've received from the public over the last couple of years. It also, is continuing to address crowding in the region and growth in the region. And so that's really how we got to the point where we're making where staff made the recommendations that you'll see here. A couple of things just to give you a little snapshot. We held the spring public engagement for Bowling Road back in May of 2023. And we asked this question of the participants, and you can see highlighted in green the number of participants that attended that event. Overall, across all of those spring engagement events, these were the key takeaways that we learned, which again is similar to what we're seeing in our feedback now. Communicate early and often, think about traffic and commute. Think about cohort continuity for students, think about stability for families, clarify what services will be available. And so I'll let you kind of read that at your own leisure, but you can kind of get an idea of these are pieces of information that shape the planning team's planning process as we got to the point where we're making a plan for Bowling Road. Again, we went back out to the community one more time. This was actually, or I'm sorry, this is the thought exchange for 2023. So, in addition to having that face to face session, we also launched a thought exchange, asked this question specific to the opening of the school. As you can see, we didn't really have strong participation from this particular area, but that did kick up when we reopened it in 2024. Um, Obviously, we didn't have any thoughts to share, so I apologize for that. But overall, when we looked across all of the thought exchanges and really thought about what that meant for the community as a whole, these were the overall themes that we saw across the multiple thought exchanges, which again added to that rich conversation we had at our in person events. In 2024, we came back out to the community and had another in person session. You can see the attendance increased a little bit, and that was held in April. And we did ask these core questions of the participants at that group. And here's what we heard. It's not dissimilar to what we heard in 2023, but maybe a little bit richer conversation, maybe a little bit more details kind of added to the concerns or ideas that families wanted the planning team to think about when developing an assignment plan for not only Bowling Road, but all of the schools that were opening for the 25-26 school year. Again, we see quite regularly things like stability. And yes, we do see calendar alignment, and we really do take that into consideration when making final recommendations. A couple more of those key takeaways are listed here. The idea of community bonds, trying to keep families within their same community. That sort of matches a little bit with what we heard earlier about proximity. And then we opened specific thought exchanges, much higher participation when we launched it in 2024. So we got more rich feedback related specifically to Bowling Road when we opened that this past year. And that was again during that May time period. And here's the specific overall results from that. Proximity and transportation really rated the highest for families. The next was student stability, community impact, school calendar, and then school capacity and resources. So you can see how all of them had relatively high ratings and support, with at least two of them, crossing over that four mark. So we three had ratings of 4.1 or higher. And that's really important because that lets us know that the large, group of participants that was participating in the thought exchange really had a lot of energy around those ideas. Before we jump into the recommendations, just real quick on stability rules because this comes up a lot. So, just as a friendly reminder, because Bowling Road is a new elementary school, it has slightly more restrictive stability rule recommendations. However, these are more expansive than what we historically have been able to do. So, if you have a student that's currently in the third or fourth grade and is recommended to be assigned to Bowling Road, meaning they'd be in the fourth or fifth grade the year that the school opens, they would automatically be eligible to remain at their current school assignment. We just can't guarantee transportation because the routes coming in and out of your neighborhood would now be directed toward Bowling Road. In addition, if you have any younger students who would be able to join them at the school, so that's rising kindergarten all the way up to rising third, they would be able to join their sibling as well. If you have a student who's getting ready to start kindergarten and you haven't pre registered them yet, we would encourage you to do that. The pre registration window has opened. It takes about a week for the school to get to the point where they can give you an ID number. So we really encourage you to go ahead and start that process. All the links are available online on our student assignment website, and that'll help you get started. Because if you can get that kindergartner's ID number before we open the stability window, you can go ahead and ask for that stability transfer when we do the traditional stability window. And that'll be sometime in December. Please do not get nervous. If you have a rising kindergartner and are unable to get them pre registered in time for the stability window, we can handle those during the regular transfer process. It just gives you that sense of relief if you can have that taken care of during the stability transfer window. And again, we'll answer any questions you have about those. So, just a quick rendering for Bowling Road. This is what the artist's rendering or the architect's rendering of what the school will look like once design is complete and finished. And this is where it's located. You probably already know it's in the Fuquay Varina area, and it is co-located on the same campus as the newly constructed Fuquay Varina Middle School. Because it is in a high growth area and in an area with schools that are facing significant crowding, as you can see, if we make no changes in the area, all of the schools will be at or near 100% crowding, or excuse me, above or near 100% crowding. And that growth is going to continue in the area. Please keep in mind these projections are based on the forecast that we received earlier this year based on the 2023 information. So we're going out now and talking with the towns and the municipal planners to get updated information, and we will receive an update on the forecast. And because Fuquay is one of our areas that's seeing a lot of rapid growth, we do expect there to be even more projected growth in this region based on those new pieces of information, but we'll wait to see. So, because there's schools in the region that are facing severe crowding issues and high growth issues or high growth concerns, we did recommend sort of impacting all of these. So, just as a reminder, the map on the left represents what the current assignment areas are for the schools that are projected to be impacted. This circled or highlighted hashed mark area is the area that's being recommended to become the new base attendance area for Bowling Road to relieve crowding for a number of schools. This area that you're seeing here is a portion of the current South Lakes Elementary base attendance area. And so that would continue to relieve South Lakes, which has been a rapid high growth area for the last couple of years. The darker green color that's being pointed to here is a portion of the existing Buckhorn Creek Elementary base attendance area. So that school is, as you noticed, was over 120% crowded, projected. It already is today. And so this would help to relieve some of that crowding. The two areas that are in the sort of purple or magenta color are portions of the Fuquay Varina Elementary base attendance area. As you can see, one portion is completely separate from the main core of the Fuquay Varina Elementary base attendance area because the growth in this region has been so high. We've had to kind of get a little creative with our attendance areas while we were waiting for Bowling Road to come online. The yellow areas that we're pointing to here are portions of the existing Lincoln Heights elementary base attendance area. This is one of our magnet schools in the region. Actually, it's the only magnet school in this region. And it's been very difficult to accept any new magnet students because the crowding has been putting so much pressure on the seats for that school. And then this sort of lighter green area right in the middle of the space represents a portion of the Herbert Akins Road elementary base attendance area. And as you can see, that's a pretty decent distance from the school. It's going to be much closer to Bowling Road Elementary. So this chart then shows what the projected or proposed, or excuse me, projected enrollment would look like at these schools if everybody who was reassigned went in the first year, which we know won't happen because of the generous stability rules. So this is sort of a picture of what it would look like after maybe a couple of years. Um, Buckhorn Creek Elementary, you'll see has a star beside it, and that's because it's actually being impacted by both the opening of Bowling Road and Rex Road Elementary. And so this star just indicates that this is the sum total of all of the recommendations related to this school. And while this does look like a rapid sort of decline in enrollment, it'll be a little bit softer because of those stability rules. And this is in a really high growth area, and it'll quickly bounce back up to 100% in a few short years. Fuquay Varina Elementary, you can see a little bit of a reduction here. They're getting ready to go into a swing space for some renovations. So this will allow them to be able to easily move in and out while the growth comes in the remaining portion of their base attendance area. Herbert Akins Road Elementary, this puts them in a much better position. They're currently way overcrowded, well over 100%. Again, you see that asterisk, it's being impacted by both Rex and bowling over time. Lincoln Heights is having impacts by both Rex and bowling, and that's just because the two schools are so close to each other. South Lakes would have a bit of a reduction and a little bit of a dip and then a resurgence after that because again, it's in a high growth area. And then Bowling Road starting at 70% on the multi track. And I want to make a special note here based on feedback from the community, we have adjusted how we open new schools. And what I mean by that is historically, we would take existing neighborhoods sufficient to fill the school to around 80 or 85% capacity in the first year to make sure it had a really robust student population. And then 1 or 2 years later, what we saw with South Lakes Elementary as an example in this region, the school would be so full because not only would those existing students be attending the school, but all of the development in the area would start to generate more students. And so within maybe 2 to 3 years of opening the school, we'd be faced with having to reassign students back out of the school, or in some cases, cap the school, meaning new residents would have to be sent to an overflow school. And we heard loud and clear from our communities over the last couple of years. Please allow the schools to fill a little bit more gradually so that we're not being assigned into a new school and then 3 years later being assigned back to the school that we were at before or something along those lines. Or you're not capping us and then the new families can't go to school with us and they're our neighbors and they're having to go to an overflow school. So the 70% represents our design intention to start with a little bit lower enrollment in the first year so that there's space because we've assigned quite a few of the new residential developments that are currently under construction or proposed, projected to be under construction based on the planning boards. So that over the next several years, it'll gradually fill up to 100% and we won't have to come back and reassign students out, let's say in 2 years. And a very specific example in this region is South Lakes. We did have to do that. I think in its third year of operations, we had to come and take some assignment areas out of the school because it had gotten so crowded so fast. And so we've learned from that experience that that is not something the community would like. And so that's part of why we're recommending multi-track is to have that longevity of assignment. And then the 70% represents that room to grow because we did do a mixture of current students as well as new developments that don't have students in them yet. Um, This is the same information. I think we just have a duplicate side. Apologize for that. The what if scenario then is the board asked us to start thinking about based on community feedback after the September 3rd release. Why can't it be traditional? It is on the same campus as Fuquay Varina Middle. Fuquay Varina Middle's on traditional. There's not any plans for Fuquay Varina Middle to become multi-track year round. Doesn't it make more sense to have both schools operate on traditional calendar? We hear that loud and clear, and when we do understand that perspective from the community, and that does make sense, from certain perspectives. as a district that has no more new schools opening in this region and recognizing the already known development and the development that's coming down the pipe for this region, this concerns us. If we were to open the school on a traditional calendar, it would lose roughly 200 seats in capacity. Because, as a reminder, the multi track basically gives us about 25% more seats with really not having to add any more construction to the site because of the way students track in and out of the building. So in this case, if we were to open Bowling Road on a traditional calendar, that same attendance area would project them to be at about 90% crowded in the first year. Another school in a slightly different region had this same projection. It opened on traditional and it was capped the first year that it was open. It opened in August and it was capped in February, and it is still capped and still doesn't have room for students that live in its attendance area. So, learning from that experience and hearing from families about wanting long term stability of assignment, if you're going to reassign me, let me just be at that school for a long period of time and not be reassigned 3 years later. That's why staff came with the initial recommendation for multi-track year round. So this is would be the projected impact of opening on traditional, and that's why staff has yet to make a recommended change. We do get that there's a calendar misalignment with the two schools being on the same campus. The reality is, because of the kindergarten through third grade class size legislation that really restricts the total number of students that can be in a kindergarten, first, second, or third grade classroom, we lose a lot of capacity in our elementary schools that we don't in our middle and high schools. And so that creates this sort of need to operate multi track year round elementary schools. It's not perfect, but it gives us that long term stability of assignment. Again, all of the information that I've shared with you is on our enrollment proposal site. And I think we are ready to dive into questions. So hopefully I went through that information as quickly as we could so we could spend as much time as possible answering your individual questions tonight. Or do I have more? I have the planning timeline. Yes. Okay. Keep putting your questions in. We're almost there. The planning timeline. So the planning timeline, just a real quick check in on where we are in the process. We're almost done. The board's going to have a public hearing on November 12th. So we thought it was important to have this session before then so we could give them a summary of the feedback we're receiving from this session as well as the thought exchange. We will actually do a little pop in with them at their work session on November 12th and present them with a full summary of all of the public engagement feedback we've received since 2023, all the way up to now, for the recommendations related to these four new schools, as well as the other recommendations that are included in the plan. And then the board is expected to take a vote on November 26th on the final draft of the plan. The public hearing is something that you can participate in, and more information is posted to the website. I think there's a link on our assignment proposal site where you can sign up to speak. Usually you can't sign up to speak though, and it's pretty close to the day of the meeting. So just kind of keep checking it as that meeting date gets closer. We're right here doing our last of our public information sessions for this round. And again, the board will have their public hearing. Our favorite websites, we see these a lot. And now I think it's time for me to give it back to Eric so I can get a drink of water and then we can start answering questions.
I mean, I was on my SAG break, if you know, my SAG after a mandated break here. All right.
Yes, if you didn't notice, his is the same voice that's on our video.
So I know we've reviewed a lot of information and we'd like to address as many of your questions as possible. Please take a few minutes and post any questions or comments using the Q&A feature. As you are posting questions, we will review those that have already been submitted during the session and start with those. So let's take a look.
Right. I did
And
see them
see.
getting posted in there. I just haven't had a chance to see what they say.
There are a handful that are in there already. And so we start with stability.
Okay.
Where can we find the form to fill out for our rising fourth grader to stay at their current school instead of being transferred to Bowling Road?
Oh, perfect. That's a relatively easy question, but it's not quite yet. So what will happen is, because we're not officially sure yet what the board's going to approve and what all will be changed. When they make that assignment approval on November 26th, our team will get quickly to work identifying specifically which students are impacted and eligible for stability transfers. And then we'll start reaching out to you directly from our office. We'll also get your information to your current principal so that you can get that information from both directions. It'll be an online form. It'll be in the same portal as our regular transfer request. So if you're applying for magnet or transfer, if you've ever done any of those online applications, it'll be the same portal. But because your student is eligible, you'll see a little button that says stability transfer, and you can click on that. Just make sure you're in the 25-26 school year when you do that, because that's an important part. And we'll put those directions in your email. But we'll send you a very specific email that says you are eligible. Now is the time. Here's the link. Please participate. In fact, we're going to monitor that very closely during the 10 days that the transfer window is open, the stability transfer window is open. And if we notice you haven't put in a transfer, we'll continue to send you reminders throughout that 10-day period just to make sure it doesn't like slip your mind. Again, we're going to get that same information to your principals. Right now, we're targeting December 4th through the 18th. However, I just always have to put a little note that's all depending on all of our technical processes happening perfectly. So no matter what, you'll get information from us probably around the 27th of November, as well as some specific information on the 4th. Just be prepared that it might be possible that on the 4th we say we're almost ready, it'll be ready on the 5th, but either way, you'll get communications from us so that you know exactly how to do it, and it will be an online form.
Okay. That's the end of the stability questions that have been asked up to this point.
Okay.
So let's jump down to calendar alignment.
Okay.
How much priority is given to family feedback when deciding between a traditional or year-round school calendar? And additionally, is the impact on multiple families considered, especially given that scheduling can be challenging if nearby middle and high schools follow a traditional calendar?
Yeah. So the family feedback is really important for us to take into consideration when making final recommendations. I will say at the elementary level, the reality is we need the seats so desperately that it's very challenging for staff being stewards of taxpayer resources and trying to also honor parent feedback about stability of assignment, meaning once we get assigned, can we just stay at that school for a period of time? Um, and that's why you're seeing more and more recommendations for elementary to be multi-track year round. We just have fewer resources to put toward the opening of new schools. Part of it is land is hard to come by. Part of it is new schools are very expensive and we have, limited bond funding. And part of it is we have 199 schools operating today, many of which are well over 40 years old, which is that sort of lifespan where they need some sort of renovation. And so the district, as you can imagine, just like in our own household budgets, is really struggling to meet all the needs of the district with the limited resources available. So yes, it is weighed and considered, and we would love to give K-12 calendar alignment to all of our families. But right now at the elementary level, it's just very difficult from a long range planning perspective to always get that together in terms of being able to have a traditional elementary, a traditional middle, and a traditional high school. We do hear from a lot of families the struggles with being on different calendars, and we're working really hard wherever possible to add capacity in the district so we can start to minimize that. I do think you'll see over the next several years more of a shift towards what we call 6-12 calendar alignment, meaning maybe more middle schools operating on traditional so that you can move over to traditional and stay on traditional as you get through high school. I think that will become more possible. In addition, we're always willing to work with families that are trying to get calendar alignment. So if you're looking to stay on the multi track year round at the middle school level, we can help you try to find one that maybe you could provide carpool to if there isn't one that comes with transportation from the district, or in the other direction, if you have, let's say, a traditional elementary and a multi-track year-round middle, and you want that middle schooler on traditional, we'll work with you to try to get them on traditional. So we will try through our other processes like magnet application and magnet and year-round application, excuse me, and the transfer application to help families that do have those mismatched calendars where we can. But by base assignment, it's not uncommon even today in other parts of the district that are experiencing the same kind of growth that this region is to have multi-track year-round elementaries and traditional middles. I wish I didn't have to say that, but that's kind of where we are. But it is factored and weighed in, and candidly, that's why this session is happening, is because the board did have that conversation at the table that they're just concerned about the mismatch, particularly because these two schools are located on the same campus. That makes it a little bit of a unique circumstance compared to other situations, and so that's why they've asked us to collect this feedback as they go into their final decision making process.
Is there any possibility to add a calendar transfer option, something with buses, that allows you to stay in traditional?
We've talked about that a lot as a district, and I'm sure you've probably heard, and you probably personally, if you have students in the school district, you've probably experienced the impacts of the national and local driver shortage, bus driver shortage. Right now, we just don't have the resources to continue to add extra routes to the system. Meaning, if we have a set of buses coming into the neighborhood to take students to this elementary school, we don't have any more drivers to send an alternate bus in there to take them to a different school. So being able to offer alternate calendars with transportation is becoming um, really challenging for the district. And you may have noticed over the last, if you didn't plug in last year, if you weren't impacted over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a significant reduction in the total number of areas that have bus service to that opposite calendar. There are some magnet schools that will have transportation, and most of our magnet schools operate on a traditional calendar, so that's a bit of a bonus. So if one of those schools works for your family, maybe because it's close to where you work or close to where your family care services are, or perhaps it's on the way to work, or it's actually near you in your community. I think we mentioned Lincoln Heights Elementary is a magnet school in this region. It's quite possible some of those would come with district transportation, but being able to identify a specific calendar option with transportation hasn't been something we've been able to do with Fidelity. That's not to say that the board wouldn't consider or ask or direct staff to try to find a way to make that work. But right now, we weren't able to put it in the plan because we just couldn't find bus drivers to cover those routes.
So that is the extent of the questions that have been submitted.
Okay. So for those of you that are still on the call, if you have any follow-up questions to any responses that I've given, or if you have any additional questions that you'd like for us to consider to help you better understand how the plan impacts you, as a reminder, if you'll just use the Q&A feature, um, we will capture those and we'll stay on for just a few minutes. And again, if you think that one of these conversations or answers that I've given to you sort of propels you to think about a different thought or a different concern or a different idea, please put it into the thought exchange, because that is something that the board can read. They check it on their own. They can go in and log in and see it just like you do as a user. You can see the summary results. In addition, if you participated early on, I might encourage you to go back in and rate a few more thoughts so that we can get a real sense of the energy around the different comments that are being posted. Did I see a new question come in?
Would this meeting recording be posted anywhere?
Yes, we are recording it now, and so it'll be posted to the main enrollment plan website, the 2025 enrollment proposal site. Usually, if you look on the left, it'll say board meetings and virtual information sessions, and then you'll see the links to all of the recordings from in September, as well as the one from last week for the general overview, and then today's. Give us a day or two. It usually takes 24 to 48 hours to get them uploaded, but it'll be up there certainly before before the weekend.
How likely is it to get one of your top two track options?
Ooh, that's actually a question I'm not sure I can answer, but we'll maybe Eric and I together can kind of work through this one. What usually happens when we're opening a new multi-track year-round elementary school is that once the principal is named and identified, they will and the plan is approved, they'll start looking at their rosters. You know, these are my future students. And if they have any students that are already on multi-track somewhere, they do really work to try to give consistency for families and let them stay on that same track if at all possible, unless that family reaches out and says, hey, I'd like a different track. Then from there, they're also going to start reaching out to you, those of you who have students that are going to be coming to the school and asking for your track preferences. And from that point forward, you will work directly with the school principal and their staff on those track assignments. Um, I know historically, let's say track four might have been super popular and track one might be really super popular. But I know that two and three have huge advantages. I've met a lot of families that really prefer two and three because of the way that it creates vacation breaks that are uncommon. And so it makes, traveling a little bit easier because you go to places that are super popular and they're a little bit less congested, or maybe it's a better for your family because it actually lines up with major family events. So we do encourage everyone to look at those different calendars, but you will work directly with the principal. But Eric, I don't know if there's a way for us to say the likelihood of getting your top two.
There isn't.
Okay.
There isn't.
But I know the principals work really hard to try to help you get a track that works for your family.
If our base school is traditional, but we're being rezoned to year round, will we be the last to pick tracks after everybody else?
Absolutely not. Everybody will be invited to participate in a process with the principal for track preference, and they'll all be processed at the same time. I do know that they try to work with those that are already on year round. And I think in this region for this particular school, it's just that one group coming from Herbert Akins Road Elementary. There might be some students that are on multi-track year round calendar options at schools like Herbert Akins or Ballantyne, but I think that you'll all be processed. I know for sure you'll all be processed at the same time, and the principal will weigh all of them evenly.
If I have a student that's already transferred to a school not being affected by the assignment plan, are they still automatically assigned to Bowling Road?
That sounds like a really unique individual question. So if we can get that family's information and have a staff member reach out, because we need to clarify there's a distinction in terms. So if a student's on a proper what we call transfer, for example, I'm a teacher at a school and it's not my zone school, but I bring my students with me, that transfer is usually valid through the fifth grade and wouldn't be subject to reassignment. But we want to be really careful that we give you correct information based on the status of your student. So if you wanna, it is confidential, so if you wanna pop some information into that Q&A, one of our staff members will grab it and reach out to you, tomorrow.
And it looks like we have exhausted what's been put in.
Okay.
So we want to thank you all very much for coming tonight to spend some time with us to hear about the assignment plan as it affects the proposal for Bowling Road. We hope that the session's been informative and that you better understand the recommendations included in the revised draft of the plan. We really do appreciate your open and honest participation. Your input and your feedback is vital to the refinement of the enrollment plan. Remember, the board will host a public hearing on November 12th, and we will present a final draft of the plan to the board on November 26th for review and approval. The current thought exchange will remain open through November the 3rd. Again, thank you very much for coming tonight, and we hope that you enjoy the remainder of your evening.
And I did see one last question, so before I stop the
Whoop.
recording and end, if I'm a rising kindergartner being rezoned to maybe Herbert Akins, because there's some shifts in the area, would we be able to have our track preferences considered, along with those that are already in the area? And the short answer is yes. They're probably just going ahead and capturing people's track preferences as they're registering and enrolling. And so that they have a pile of those all ready to go when it's time to make track placement decisions. But they'll know that you're assigned to the school as early as, November 27th ish. And they'll start reaching out to you to get that information from you as well. So you will be weighted considered at the same sort of time and level as anybody who's coming in new to the school. So hopefully that's helpful. And again, we always ask if you have questions that are specific to track assignment. At some point, it's really best to ask those directly of the school staff because they monitor and manage those processes on their campuses, and they're usually more than happy to help you navigate that process at their school. It'll be hard at Bowling Road until they name a principal, but as soon as they do, that person will be reaching out to you as well. Thank y'all so much. We appreciate you coming and hope you found the information helpful and useful. And again, please continue participating in the thought exchange through November 30th. Good night.